Welcome back to the Agents Confidential podcast. Today we have a special guest, Maranda Stott from Agent Equity Group, our compliance officer, agent support mastermind, and conqueror of all things put in front of her. Maranda, we're excited to have you. Of all the things that you do, we are going to be focusing on compliance today. And listeners, don't worry, we're going to keep it light. We're going to keep it fun and go through some things. We've got Yana here to help us out and asking some great questions of Maranda. Let's get into it.
Yeah, the goal of this episode is just to understand what compliance really means, why it matters, and how to avoid some easy to make mistakes. So, welcome, Maranda. Thank you so much for coming on today. And I think let's start simple. What is compliance and why does it matter?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. Happy to be here. Compliance really is just rules. It's following the rules to play the game. So if you want to be in the Medicare space or insurance space, there are rules that you have to follow in order to do that. And that is what compliance is. I mean, I would almost more to like a sport is kind of how I think of it.
I got one. Kind of like the rules of golf.
Oh,
Right. If you want to play, you got to follow the rules.
Yeah, which makes it fair for everyone, right? So that if I'm on hole 4, not following the rules, taking penalties and things like that, because you're on a different hole playing, it makes it a fair match. Where if I'm not following the rules and I'm marketing incorrectly or selling products incorrectly, it's not fair to the marketplace, the competitors, and especially the clients.
Right.
And we need to protect those.
Yeah.
I feel like that's why any rule is made, is to protect the masses, right? And I know and maybe we'll have some questions about it later, where a lot of agents are like, that's a stupid rule, that, or that doesn't make sense. Why would that even need to be a rule?
Yeah, and there definitely are some of those. But the goal, I believe, overall is just that, to protect the consumer.
Yep.
especially the seniors. Do you have any big compliance myths that you see agents making or believing?
Yeah, there are some that I come across more than others. I hear often, I'd say if it's not written down, it didn't happen. So a lot of people think, well, what I said, it wasn't on the recorded line. So, it was just small talk, or, we were just chatting face to face. What you say matters 100%. There's a lot of compliance around what you can and can't say, some of the requirements in order to say it, like, the scope of appointment. So what you say matters 100%. You have a responsibility to speak the truth and be honest and accurate to the best of your knowledge. So yes, what comes out of your mouth matters greatly. I would say some other things I hear is, compliance. It's really not my job to understand it. That's for someone else. That's maybe the carrier or whomever it might be. But compliance is everybody's responsibility. Agents, carriers, uplines, even support staff, anyone who is dealing or interacting with beneficiaries or their information is held to the same compliance standards.
What are some of the common mistakes agents are making, especially during AEP?
The big one, so we get throughout the year random audits by carriers. So not necessarily triggered by any incident or complaint, but they will just, kind of pull some names out of a hat and say, hey, you had a sale on this date with this individual. We need a scope of appointment. We need the call recording if it was done over the phone. And that's what I've run into, is they didn't have that scope of appointment, or it wasn't within the 48-hour window. Maybe it was, a current client that they've worked with or someone they know. So they're a little lax on the compliancy. And again, there was no issue that caused the audit. It was completely random. But if you don't have those required compliance documents, you can, get in some trouble there. Same with not recording calls. Maybe they had a phone call, but it didn't get recorded. I would say, ignorance is not an excuse. I didn't know. I couldn't get the technology to work. I thought it was recording, but it didn't. Understandable, it happens, but, in the end, they don't care. You have to record the calls, in that situation. Enrolling in plans, I'd say enrolling in plans before completing certifications. That is a big one. I've run into those often where the carrier will reach out and say, hey, so-and-so agent enrolled someone in this plan and they are not certified to sell this plan. They usually will still let the beneficiary stay in the plan, but now the agent is not receiving commission for that.
That'll get people's attention.
Exactly. And usually they thought they completed it, didn't realize it wasn't done. Or if it's a newer agent, maybe they just went through the contracting process and didn't quite realize there's that second step for the certification side. But either way, they put them in the plan and then we get a call saying, hey, this person was not compliant.
And with those certifications, it's basically a training on the plan, right? So like just so that the carrier makes sure that the agent is responsible for the knowledge that they're sharing.
It is. It's usually a mix of specific product training and then compliance. Each carrier has their own little compliance module or training session. It's all kind of under the same umbrella, but they have their own twists to it.
Yeah.
I kind of think about it, Yana. I like my analogies sometimes miss. So if this one misses, let me know. But I like removing ourselves from this industry and thinking about, like if we were selling cars, right? Let's say we're on a used car lot. To know everything about every make and model out there, it's not even required by that industry. Because if the person has a problem with it, they could sell it, or if they don't like it, or you told me it was 700 horsepower and it's only 600. There's not a compliance flag they can throw and say, hey, you misguided me. But in this industry, there is, right? You have to know what you're signing someone up for because they're going to be using it and there's restricted times when they can change and those sorts of things. But I feel like it's kind of like back to the speed limit thing. If you're not caught, people get used to doing it, right? Yes. And I find when I get a speeding ticket, shortly after that, I am a very cautious driver and follow the speed limit rules. I say a lot, there's two main motivations for any human is towards a goal or away from pain. I feel like most people look at compliance as pain. I want to avoid having a compliance issue. I don't want to use my E&O insurance. I don't want to have to deal with these issues. So I'm going to be compliant, not necessarily looking at it as I want to be compliant and for the betterment of my clients and my practice and things like that. What are some of the penalties of being found out of compliance?
Like in violation.
Yeah, in violation that agents need to worry about.
It can often depend on the defense, what happened, what was the error, but usually get a talk to from the carrier. Corrective action could include just redoing that training, the product training, maybe having to sit in on an additional compliance training. That's usually the first step. So, if you mess up, it's not the end of the world. You're not going to lose your license unless you did something grossly inaccurate. But typically, they start with just some training. They say, okay, let's have a touch base on these rules again. Now, if it happens again, you're a repeat offender, then they could pull your contract. So you could no longer offer those products. If it was just straight fraud, you could lose your license, your state license, and not be able to sell products at all.
Are there fines as well?
There absolutely could be fines.
Yeah.
That would be very severe. Fines are more on internal billing sides of things. If someone is, trying to get money from the government for a service they didn't provide. Not many fines can fall to the agent unless they're working with somebody to make that happen.
I look at the big thing of not being able to make commission, right? Cut off your license or say like, okay, you can't write either this carrier, let's say it's a very popular carrier, or you just can't write at all. I mean, taking away your livelihood, not to maybe worry about fines as much, but that would be a huge deterrent to being out of compliance. Maranda, let's talk about marketing. What rules should agents know when posting on social media or running ads?
Yeah, really. I see a lot on social media of agents either posting or asking to post or wanting to post different ads with carrier logos. You cannot use a carrier logo on your ad without explicit permission from the carrier. Generally, they are not going to provide that permission. Most carriers do have their own carrier content that you can utilize, that they created, it's CMS approved, and that they share out for agents. So you could share that out. So if you wanted to send a post and promote a particular carrier, I would go into your agent portal, see if you can find that content, or reach out to your broker manager and see what they have to use. But you cannot use carrier logos. You cannot discuss any specific plan details, even if it's like get $1,000 in dental. You're not naming the carrier, but you're still talking about a specific benefit that
Interesting.
you cannot do. Generally, I say just keep it generic, keep it focused on Medicare itself, some of the rules, enrollment periods, when people can make changes, but keeping that general Medicare information, think of it as just more of an educational side, not product specific.
For sure.
And I think you would agree, Anna, about maybe focusing on like your branding and yourself and your service and what you do for people, not on these specific little benefits.
Yeah, for sure. Miranda, what's the right way to collect and store a scope of appointment?
Yeah, so there's multiple ways you can
Yeah.
collect a scope. You could do it over the phone, various enrollment platforms. We use Benefit Advice here at AEG has the option where you can text a link, you can email a link, you can take it verbally over the phone as long as it's being recorded. If someone's not comfortable with that, you could mail them a physical form in the mail for them to fill out. They just need to get it back to you. The rule is you receive the scope of appointment 48 hours prior, so you couldn't say bring it with you. So maybe add a postage paid return envelope in there. But really, using the platforms is probably the easiest way. You could also do different types of digital signatures through like a jot form or a DocuSign that could be emailed or sent via text.
Do you store
So the
everything
main-
electronically?
You don't have to. So you have to keep scope of appointments for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
You could, print it out and have a file in your file cabinet and hang on to them. That's perfectly fine. Or you could scan them in and keep them on, a Dropbox or your hard drive, whichever you prefer. Just anytime within that 10-year period, a carrier could reach out and say, hey, you enrolled Susie Smith in this plan on this date 6 years ago. We need to see a copy of the scope. So you need to be able to pull that scope and send it in. So really, however you want to store that is up to you.
We're big fans of electronic.
Yeah.
I personally, would recommend scan it in and store it that way. Otherwise, you're worrying about flood, fire, damages.
Yeah. I didn't even think about that. I also didn't know you needed to receive it 48 hours before. I know I have,
Yeah.
but like I've done that, but I didn't know that was like a specific rule. Yeah.
For sure. And, there's ways to work around that. Maybe you mail it to somebody because they aren't comfortable doing it digitally. They could sign it. They could text, take a picture and text it back to you. So you have it. And then if they want to bring the physical form for you to keep, you can do that. But
Interesting.
they just don't want people backdating it, coming in and I'm just going to put the date on for 48 hours ago.
Yeah.
So just getting that.
I was going to
form
say
to you.
the devil on my shoulder is screaming, it's a walk-in,
Yeah.
right?
For sure. And I'm sure many people do that, put a lot of things down as walk-ins when they were actually scheduled appointments. I wouldn't suggest it.
Nope.
That's not compliant.
Mm-hmm.
And it could come around and get you.
Yeah.
100%.
If someone has a bad situation, a complaint, something happens, and they're really digging into figuring out how that appointment went down and the details, it could come up.
Yeah.
And through life experience, I've found we're all really good friends until something goes wrong.
Yes.
Right? Oh, my clients love me. They would never do that. Oh, yeah, their bills aren't being paid. Maybe they don't want to do that to you, but that's what they're going to do. Or it comes up not ill-intended to get back at the agent, but it happens through all these other things. You just CYA means cover your backside. and do it properly.
Right.
What are the penalties for the scope of appointment?
It could be like if you didn't have one, it
Yeah.
could be considered a non-compliant sale and they wouldn't have to pay you commission on it. And then
Okay.
you
Could
might have to go through that training.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
They could probably do a clawback on commissions.
Oh, yeah.
So if they paid you or they've been paying you for the last, your example recently, 6 years, and it was a non-compliant sale,
You'd have to pay back.
you
all
could
of
pay
that?
back all that commission.
That is
Yeah.
very interesting.
That gets
So get your
expensive.
scope of appointment.
Yeah. Just
stay
follow the
compliant.
rules. Yeah.
Yeah.
Stay compliant so you can stay paid.
Are
Yeah.
there differences in compliance for LOA agents versus independent?
Not necessarily. I mean, everybody is responsible for compliance,
Mhm.
whether you're an LOA or you're independent. Now, if you're an agency owner and you have LOAs underneath you, you have a little bit added compliance because you're responsible for making sure your LOAs are compliant. I mean, they're still
Mhm.
individually responsible, but your role is to oversee them and make sure they're following the rules, or at least that they know the rules
Yeah.
to follow. So you have that, added responsibility.
Does compliance regulations extend to non-licensed staff members?
Yes.
Okay, so even if you're not licensed, you need to be following the rules. So again, you can't be ignorant and say, well, I'm just a support person or I just answer the phones kind of thing.
Correct. Yes. Anyone dealing with personal information is responsible for compliance. Even if it's a receptionist that's answering the phone, a client may call in and say, "Hey, what's my copay again for this procedure?" Well, the receptionist is not authorized to give that type of information. So
Right.
there is compliance around even what they can say and can provide as far as compliance.
Wonder how many times that one's broken, right? Trying to get things
Right.
done, right? And you,
Especially during AEP.
yeah, and
stuff
you
like
want to
that.
get, keep things moving, get people the answers that they're asking for, and you're having to, slow down and do it properly.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they can, tell them where to go to get that information. Hey, you should check out your summary of benefits. That's probably where it would be listed.
Mm.
But they can't say that would be a $40 copay.
Right. But
Interesting.
that person could forward them that information, right? Because they've sent it to them before
Or just direct them where to find it on like the carrier website.
Oh, yeah, that's a great,
Interesting.
teach them how to fish.
Exactly.
Wow. That's important. Miranda, do you have any tips for how an agent can prep now so that they're not scrambling during AEP when it comes to compliance?
Yeah, for sure. I would say, make sure all your contracting is finalized. If you're adding new carriers that you want to offer, get that done as soon as possible. Complete all the certifications, especially for newer agents. A lot of them don't realize this is an annual process. They might go through it once in the spring, get it all done, and think they're ready for that upcoming AEP, not realizing they need to do it all over again. So, make your checklist of all the carriers and just check them off as you go down and complete those certifications. Have your call recording system in place ahead of time, however you're going to do that, through an app, a platform, Zoom, whatever you're going to use. Just know what you're going to use, test it. So when you're right in the middle of appointments, it's not, failing or not working, or you got to figure out, how to make it work.
I would just add, make it automated, that it's just
Yes.
always recording, or
Yeah.
it's an app, or because if you have to turn it on, you'll forget
Absolutely.
at some point.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I would add getting that scope of appointment process. We talked about there's different ways you can send that out, kind of determine what way or ways you're going to use and just make that your process. So as those calls come in and people want to send appointments, you're not kind of thinking, oh, do I text this? Should I read it over the phone? Whatever you're going to do, just make it consistent
Yep.
and do it. So, have that process in place. And the storage as well. You're going to have to keep these stored, however you're going to do that. Just know, so it's a quick process. You're not figuring it out right in the middle of everything. And I always suggest a CRM of some point. It doesn't have to be a big, expensive, elaborate CRM, but have something. Keep good notes. Record keeping is very important because we're supposed to hang on to all of this for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
In that example, someone calls you about an appointment from 6 years ago. Well, you're probably not going to remember what was discussed in that appointment.
Right.
But you should be able to go to your CRM and say, okay, this is what we met or when we met, what we talked about. These were the meds, doctors they provided at that time. Here's why they selected X plan. It was enrolled through whatever platform. Just having all that in place. Personally, I like to do my CRM notes after the appointment. I tend to keep a little buffer time after appointments to put those notes in, because even after a day, if you're seeing 8 people and then at 6 p.m., you got to go back and remember what was discussed at 8 a.m. in that first appointment. I tend to not retain that as well. So I like to keep very good notes.
Yeah.
Sarah becomes Sally, and
Right.
messing those up a
Kind
little
of a
bit.
full brain at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've recently recommended to agents, and we've been using it as well, is AI notes. They can summarize things and make calls to action and follow up as well. It allows you to have more eye contact with your clients instead of scribbling notes or typing. I know I used to have a doctor that would literally look at me and is typing on the screen everything I said. It was so uncomfortable, where you can just have an app on your phone or, a device of some sort recording and having those, just storing that in your CRM,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd say, whatever it is you're going to do, just know what you're going to do. Have
Yeah.
that process, down, so you're not scrambling in the middle of the appointment or right before clients.
Be ready
Yeah.
to go.
For sure.
If an agent is unsure about something, where should they go or who should they ask?
Yeah, I always say start with the carrier, utilize the carrier resources. A lot of compliant information is on there. Definitely reach out to your carrier reps. They are there to help you. They love to help. That's what they're there for, and they are very, very knowledgeable. So if you have a question, maybe you want to put a post out on social media and you're not quite sure if it's compliant, run it by the carrier rep, and they might say yes or no, or they might say no, but hey, in this folder, we've got a dozen templates you can choose from. So
Right.
start with the carrier for sure. If it's general information, Medicare.gov, Google, use
Yeah.
it. Go to Medicare.gov. There is tons of information on Medicare.gov. You just got to get comfortable and familiar how to search and find it.
Plus, that would be the most probably up to date as
Correct.
well, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be accurate information. Absolutely. And then you can reach out to us, your upline or your FMO at AEG. Always give us a call.
Yeah, we have like a compliance section on the website.
Yep. The website has some compliance information on there. In the end, if you're just not finding what you're looking for or it's not making sense, give us a call, give me a call. I don't necessarily know every answer, but I am pretty good at finding them.
We also have the Agents Confidential Facebook page. You can post a question on there.
Yep.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So you get some other agents' feedback as well as some carrier reps that are on there. And, edit. That would be a great tool to use.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, Miranda, for those people like me that don't always listen, apologize. Could you give us a rapid fire, just kind of checklist of what agents should be doing pre-AEP to be ready? And then we'll wrap up this episode.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say get your contracting finalized, complete all your carrier certifications, have your call recording system in place, your SOA process in place, and the storage that you're going to utilize them. If that's a cloud service, make sure that's set up and ready to go. And then have a CRM option ready to go as well. And just set time where you can add those notes and get them in there. And I can't express enough, keep good notes.
Fantastic.
Love it.
Awesome, Miranda. Thank you so much for your help today. We really appreciate you explaining a sometimes overwhelming concept and in compliance and some unknown things to kind of bring to light and putting them in a way that our agents can really be certain that they're in compliance and not going to have issues. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on, Miranda.